Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. My name's Mark Talbot, inmate A921067. I was doing 25 to life for armed robbery and aggravated assault. San Quentin State Prison, California's oldest and toughest lockup, was my home for the past 7 years. You've probably heard the name. A fortress of concrete and iron on the edge of the San Francisco Bay, surrounded by razor wire, watchtowers, and men with rifles trained to shoot first and ask later. It was built for lifers, for the ones who weren't ever supposed to walk free. But none of that mattered when the outbreak hit. I was in cell block 5, upper tier, tier 3 to be exact. My cellmate was Lewis Granger, 52, doing life without parole for 3 counts of homicide. We weren't friends. We weren't enemies either. He was the kind of guy who didn't talk unless he had to, spent most of his day sketching birds, and listening to the baseball game on a contraband earpiece sewn into his pillow. But I knew he was watching the guards real close for the last week or so. Something was off. I remember that morning. It was just past 6 a.m. Count time. The usual routine. Lights came on with a buzz and a flicker. I was already awake. Couldn't sleep much that night. I kept hearing something strange, like groaning. At first, I figured it was just one of the guys down in solitary messing around trying to get attention. Happens all the time. But there was a tension in the air that morning. You could feel it in your bones. Even Granger muttered, "Something's wrong," before slipping on his state-issued slippers. The guard that did count that morning wasn't the usual C.O. Benson. It was a guy I didn't recognize. Pale, jittery, and his uniform was partially unbuttoned. His sidearm wasn't even clipped down. Granger caught it too. He stood by the bars, staring the guy down like a hawk. The CO moved fast, barely glanced inside each cell. When he passed, I asked, "New guy?" Granger shook his head. "No, that's Miller, worked admin up top. Paperwork guy, not supposed to be on the tiers." Strange. 10 minutes later, all hell broke loose. It started in the chow hall. Word got down fast. Somebody bit an inmate during breakfast. Not a fight, not a brawl. Bit, like tore into his neck and wouldn't stop. The guards responded with tear gas and batons, but it didn't work. I mean, nothing worked. The one who bit the guy? He kept moving, kept attacking, even after getting shot twice in the chest. By 6:45, the prison was in full lockdown. Sirens blared. All cell doors sealed. Over the intercom, Warden Ellis himself, usually calm, measured, was barking out panicked instructions. "Remain in your cells. Do not approach your doors. All movement is suspended until further notice." And then gunfire, a lot of it. Not the warning shot kind either, controlled bursts. M4S from the armory. I could tell by the rhythm. 2, maybe 3 guards in a hallway sweep. Semi-auto. Muzzle discipline. The sound of seasoned response. I saw one of them through the bars, maybe 20 yards down the tier. C.O. Juarez, a Marine vet, solid guy. He was dragging another officer back toward the elevator. That other officer was missing half his throat. Granger and I stared at each other. "What the hell is going on?" I asked, like he had some secret answer. But he just picked up his little sketchbook and said, "You ever read about prions?" "What?" He didn't respond, just went back to drawing. The power flickered around 7:20. The hallway lights dimmed, came back in emergency red. The air system shut off too. We could hear screams echoing from the lower tiers. Metal slamming. The heavy thump of boots running. Then nothing. For a while, it was just silence. The doors weren't opening. We were trapped like rats in a cage. Then came the smell. Burnt hair, copper, and something else. Something wrong. A rot that didn't belong in a prison. I'd smelled blood before, but this was decay, fresh and putrid at the same time. I looked down the hallway and saw one of the guards standing there, motionless. Head tilted. Blood soaked the front of his vest. At first, I thought maybe he was injured in shock. Then he twitched again, and then he turned toward us, slow, like he was listening for something instead of looking. His eyes weren't right. They were glazed over, milky. Veins darkened around his temples like spiderwebs. His mouth hung open. And then he sprinted toward the cells. I'll never forget the sound he made. Not a scream, not a growl. Something deeper, throaty, animal. He slammed into the bars of cell 508. The inmate inside screamed as the thing grabbed hold of the bars, reaching between them, clawing, biting at air like a rabid dog. I heard bones snap. I think it broke its own fingers trying to reach further. The rest of us were frozen. What were we supposed to do? Then came the banging. Not just from that one. From below, hundreds of fists pounding on steel, doors, walls. Echoing from solitary. The show. That's when I realized something. They weren't outside trying to get in. They were inside trying to get out. Something had gotten loose in the prison population. Something that turned men into monsters. And no one was coming to save us. Around 8 o'clock, the locks disengaged. Not all of them. Just a few, maybe a system override. Maybe someone in central control tried to open up the admin corridor to make a break for it, but whatever they did, it cascaded. Doors on our tier buzzed open one by one, including ours. Granger didn't move at first. He just looked at the open cell door, then at me. "This ain't no riot," he said quietly. "This is something worse." I knew we couldn't stay put. That creature, whatever it was, had wandered off toward the north stairwell. The other inmates were already scattering. Some ran, some tried to barricade doors, some just stood and prayed. We made a break for the CO break room down the hall. Granger grabbed a broom handle from a janitor's closet. I tore a metal towel rack off the wall in the shower block. Crude weapons, better than nothing. The break room was trashed, tables overturned, coffee spilled. One of the vending machines had been shattered, probably by someone trying to get food. There was a small first aid kit in the cabinet and a fire axe in a red case. Granger handed me the axe. "You ever use one of these?" "Not outside fire drills." "Well, use it like it owes you money." At 8:30 a.m., the emergency generator started to fail. The lights flickered again. Over the radio in the break room, we caught fragments of transmissions from Central Dispatch. Containment breach in East Wing. Multiple officers down, possible biological threat. Units retreating to visitors' lobby. Do not engage unless, and then static. Granger turned the dial. Nothing. Just white noise and the distant echo of more pounding. We needed to get out of cell block 5 and make our way to the secure transfer corridor. That connected to the armory and the main gate. If there was any chance of escape, that was it. But there was a major problem. Between us and the corridor was D-block. Segregation and overflow holding. It was built like a bunker, concrete reinforced, isolated for high-risk inmates. The kind of place they sent people who couldn't even function inside a prison. Gang enforcers, violent lifers, mentally unstable offenders. And now, judging from the muffled pounding sounds and warped echo of screams, something had already spread inside. Granger and I slipped out of the break room, keeping to the walls. The emergency lighting cast a red hue over the corridor, and everything felt off kilter, like the building was breathing. I carried the fire axe in both hands, not because I thought it'd protect me from what I'd seen, but because not holding it felt worse. We passed 2 bodies slumped near the security checkpoint, both correctional officers. One had his throat torn open. The other was missing a chunk of flesh from his calf, and his face was locked in the kind of terror you don't see on living people. The hallway smelled of bleach, blood, and the unmistakable stench of human waste. A cleanup cart had been knocked over, its supplies spilled across the floor like someone tried to form a barricade and failed. To get to D Block, we had to descend the south stairwell and cut through the guard tunnel. It was a narrow passage running between cell wings, built with blast doors and manual overrides in case of riot containment. In theory, it was secure. In practice, it was a trap. Halfway down the stairwell, we heard the shuffling. Not the hurried steps of a survivor, but something dragging across the concrete. Slow, inconsistent. Granger held up a hand and we paused on the middle landing. Just below us, barely lit by the backup lights, a figure was hunched against the wall. It was one of the inmates from earlier, shirtless, tattoos smeared with blood. He was chewing something, head bowed, shoulders jerking. I couldn't see the details, but the way his jaw moved was unnatural, more tearing than biting. Granger leaned forward slowly, trying to get a look. The figure jerked upright without warning, as if sensing us. His eyes glowed faintly in the red emergency light. Bloodshot, unfocused, but somehow locked right onto us. I could tell he wasn't thinking. There was no hesitation, no fear, just raw instinct. He let out a sound, a deep, pulsing rasp, and charged up the stairs. I didn't think, I just raised the axe. He came fast, faster than a man bleeding that much had any right to. I brought the blade down on his collarbone, and the impact jolted my arms. It didn't kill him. He kept moving, grabbing at my throat. I yanked the axe free and swung again, this time catching his temple. The second hit did the job. He crumpled forward, body twitching, blood pooling on the stairs. We didn't speak. We couldn't. We just kept moving. At the base of the stairwell, the guard tunnel's manual lock was still intact. I forced the door open and we slipped inside. It was a low-ceilinged concrete corridor, no wider than 4 feet. Pipes lined the ceiling, condensation dripping every few seconds. There was no lighting except for a single emergency beacon blinking in the distance. The walls were soundproofed, designed to block out riot noise. That made it worse. Made it feel like we'd stepped into a vacuum, deafened by silence and our own heartbeat. We advanced slowly, passing lockers and fuse boxes. At the halfway mark, we found signs of struggle. Blood smeared against the wall, handprints trailing toward the exit. A broken baton lay near an empty stun gun holster. The security checkpoint ahead had been breached. The glass window was shattered inward. We peeked inside the small guard station and saw a revolver lying on the floor beside a trail of blood. Granger slipped inside and grabbed it, checking the cylinder. 5 rounds left, no spare ammo. He gave it a quick nod and slipped it into the back of his waistband. I didn't ask for it. His hands didn't shake. Mine were still trembling. We emerged into the D-Block administrative lobby. It was chaos. The metal detector was torn apart. Filing cabinets overturned. The front desk had blood streaks trailing behind it like someone was dragged away. The double security doors leading into the holding cells were pried open, bent inward. That wasn't something a human could do without tools. A distant clanging echoed from inside, then another, sharp, metallic. We moved toward the corridor slowly, checking each angle. Granger's head was on a swivel. He kept looking at the ceiling, at the floor, listening for sounds I couldn't hear. He'd done time before. Not just a few years, real time, decades. You learn things in prison that no civilian could ever teach you. You learn to sense movement through silence, to track breath patterns in shadows. He raised a hand as we passed holding cell 3. Something shifted inside. We paused, listening. The clanging came again. Then a voice, quiet, cracked. "Help! Help me!" I peeked through the narrow slot. Inside was an inmate, strapped to a restraint chair, bleeding from the nose and mouth. He was twitching, face pale, shirt soaked in sweat. I recognized the uniform. Segregation inmate, likely high risk. He looked up at me, eyes glassy. "Please. They left me here. They just locked me in." Granger stepped forward and pulled the side latch. The door clicked open. "No," I whispered, grabbing his arm. But it was too late. The man in the chair convulsed violently. His head snapped back, mouth gaping. He let out a scream, a shriek that didn't belong in the throat of any man. His eyes rolled back. Then, just as suddenly, his restraints buckled. They weren't tight enough. His arms whipped free, and he launched himself toward the door. Granger shoved it shut just in time. The inmate slammed against the reinforced window, snarling, biting at the slot. "That's not a man anymore," Granger muttered. "That's infection." I asked what he meant. "It's not a virus, not like the movies. I've seen guys go from bleeding to bloodthirsty in 5 minutes. That's something else. It's faster than anything natural." We pressed forward, skirting the holding cells until we reached the junction. One path leading to the secure transfer corridor, the other to the old isolation wing. I knew from the blueprints that the STC was supposed to have a biometric scanner and 2 security checkpoints, but if the power was down, there was no guarantee either one would work. We chose the right-hand corridor, keeping to the walls. The corridor sloped slightly downward, and we soon reached the first checkpoint. The scanner was dark, unpowered. A large red sign above the door read, "Authorized personnel, only deadly force may be used under other circumstances." That would have stopped me. Not today. The door itself was heavy, reinforced steel with magnetic locks. No power, no open, but there was a maintenance panel on the side, locked with a 4-bolt security clasp. Granger pulled a pry bar from a janitorial kit we'd picked up earlier and started working the panel. I kept watch, listening to the growing sounds behind us. Somewhere back near the lobby, we heard a scream cut short. Fast footsteps, then silence. Granger got the panel open after 3 minutes. Inside was a manual release crank. He started turning it. The metal groaned as the internal locks disengaged. Then we heard the alarm. It was faint, internal, and triggered by the override. Somewhere, deep inside the facility, a tone began to repeat every 10 seconds. A distress signal. Someone was still trying to run systems on backup. The door opened inward with a hiss of depressurized air. Beyond it, the corridor curved towards the transfer yard, where they moved inmates to vehicles, ambulances, or federal transport vans. If there were any surviving guards, they'd be there. We crossed into the corridor and sealed the door behind us. We were officially out of D Block. But we weren't safe. Ahead, the lights flickered on and off, and something scraped across the floor in the shadows. A gurney, then another, rolling forward slowly, pushed by something we couldn't yet see. We crouched low, sticking to the wall. The walls of the corridor were lined with 2-way mirrors for observation. On the other side, a small med bay flickered with emergency lighting. Inside it, I saw movement. 3 figures. One was a guard. The others, not anymore. They were on top of him, limbs twitching, jaws working mechanically. The horror wasn't that they were feeding. The horror was that the guard's hand was still moving, twitching in protest, even as half his chest was gone. We passed the observation zone and reached the end of the corridor, another door marked Armory Access Secure Only. This one had a mechanical lock. Granger tried his luck with the tools again, and within a minute we were inside. It was the first stroke of luck we'd had all day. Inside the small armory room, most of the firearms had been cleared out, likely by panicked officers earlier. But 2 lockers remained sealed. I smashed one open with the axe and found a Remington 870 pump action, 2 boxes of 12-gauge shells, and a utility belt. Granger took a Smith & Wesson M&P from the second locker, and a holster. We each grabbed a stab vest and tactical gloves. It wasn't ideal, but it was something. We rested for a moment, the first real pause since all of this started. My hands were raw from gripping the axe. My shirt was soaked with sweat. I looked at Granger and asked him how he'd stayed calm. "I've been waiting for something like this," he said. "Not exactly this, but something to tip the balance. System's been rotting for decades, now it's collapsing." I didn't respond right away. Granger's words hung in the stale, recycled air like the last echo of a truth nobody wants to admit. He was still staring at the cinder-block walls like he could see something buried behind them. Memories, maybe, or something worse. I loaded the shotgun, sliding shells into the tube one by one with hands that had finally stopped shaking. Not because I was calm, because my brain had started to compartmentalize the horror into simple math. Hallway length, ammunition count, exit locations, reload time. That's what survival did. It made you mechanical. We left the armory and stepped back into the corridor. The clanging from D Block had grown quieter behind the sealed door, but the faint metallic ring of the sirens outside was growing louder. It wasn't a wailing scream like the fire alarms from earlier. This one was deeper, slower, 3 rising notes followed by silence. Repeating. I didn't know the protocol, but I'd heard stories. If that siren was real, it meant someone up the chain had declared a Tier 1 containment breach. That didn't mean rescue. It meant no one was allowed to leave. Not us, not the guards, not the infected. The corridor ahead curved left toward the transfer yard entrance. This was where prisoners were typically loaded into armored vans or escorted through to hospital transport. A heavy-duty hydraulic gate separated the prison interior from the open-air sally port, and if we were lucky, it would still be open, or at least breakable. As we approached, the lighting changed again. No more flickering fluorescence, just open sky bleeding through a narrow row of reinforced glass panes above the gate. The early morning light cast a sickly gray hue across the yard. Fog had rolled in from the bay, curling through the gaps in the perimeter fence like smoke from a dying fire. Granger stepped forward and glanced through the narrow view slot beside the loading gate. He froze. "What is it?" I asked, moving beside him. "They stacked the bodies," he muttered. "They tried to block the exit with them." I looked through the slot. At first, I didn't understand what I was seeing. Then the shapes resolved into twisted piles of uniformed forms. Guards, inmates, maybe staff, dumped like cordwood against the main rolling gate. Some were missing limbs. Others had been torn open entirely. But they hadn't been thrown there by accident. They were arranged, a crude barrier, a blockade built in panic or desperation. Beyond the bodies, the exterior floodlights were still active, casting halos through the fog. A transport van was jackknifed against the far fence, rear doors open, the driver's side window shattered. No movement, no sign of life. But then something stirred behind the barricade. A low shuffle, the twitch of a limb. One of the corpses moved, not twitching from nerves, but crawling, pulling itself forward with one hand, dragging a broken leg behind. Its head turned toward the glass. I saw its face, smashed in on one side, skull partially exposed, lips torn back from blackened teeth. It didn't groan. It didn't scream. It just kept crawling, inch by inch, until it vanished from view beneath the lip of the door. Granger stepped back. We're not getting out through that gate, not unless we want to be on top of that pile. There was another option. The visitor's lobby. It had a separate exit on the west side, connected by an access hallway that passed through admin processing. According to the maps on the wall, that meant cutting through the warden's corridor. Restricted, but no worse than where we'd already been. It also meant dealing with whatever had broken the emergency response line. That siren wasn't just a recording, something was still triggering the grid. We moved quickly. The hallway to admin was unlit, save for the pale beams filtering in from the yard windows. The floor here was carpeted, old institutional blue-gray, stained with years of coffee spills and boot polish. It muffled our footsteps, which helped. At the end of the corridor was the warden's office suite. Double doors, frosted glass, and an emergency crash bar. I tested it. Unlocked. Inside, the office was trashed. Desks overturned, drawers pulled out, a framed photograph cracked underfoot. A half-drunk cup of coffee sat on the floor beside a spilled folder of transport manifests. One wall had a corkboard filled with facility schedules, keys, emergency protocols. The kind of administrative chaos you never think twice about, until the world ends and every paper feels like a lifeline. I scanned the board and found what I needed: a laminated emergency map showing the visitor's lobby exit and a side note scrawled in red marker: secondary lockdown keyed to warden or captain only. No override. Granger rifled through the desk drawers and came up with a small black keycard labeled Warden Primary. He held it up. Looks like we're in business. We pushed through the far side of the suite into the processing hallway. The smell hit us immediately, stronger than anything so far. A combination of decay, cleaning chemicals, and something underneath both. Like meat left out too long in the sun, the lights here were shattered, wires hanging from the ceiling, blood smears tracked along the walls, handprints, scratches. Bullet holes marked one side of the corridor, with shell casings still scattered across the floor. Granger crouched and picked one up. .40 caliber. Guard issue. He gestured to a nearby security booth with shattered glass and a body slumped across the desk. Didn't help him. We moved past the booth toward the processing wing. The air felt heavier here, as if the building itself was suffocating. I stepped over a body wearing a maintenance uniform. His head was turned at an impossible angle. Neck snapped completely backward, eyes still open. His mouth was full of blood. Not dripping out, full, as if he'd drowned in it. I kept my shotgun raised, listening for anything beyond our own breathing. At the far end of the hallway was the final checkpoint. A sliding steel door with a biometric panel and card reader. Granger slid the black card through. The reader beeped, then flashed red. Error in complete protocol. Try again, I said, stepping forward. He did, same result. Then, a voice crackled to life from the overhead speaker. This is Officer Miriam Graves. If you're hearing this, do not attempt to access the visitor's lobby. The infection has breached the west corridor. I repeat, do not. The message cut off. Silence. Then footsteps. Not ours. From behind us. I spun around, shotgun aimed down the hallway. The figure that emerged wasn't running. He was walking, slowly, deliberately, dressed in black tactical gear, helmet gone, face smeared with blood that wasn't his. He held a service pistol in one hand, his badge still clipped to his vest. Captain Luis Garza. He wasn't infected, at least not yet. But his eyes were wrong. Too wide, too calm. "You got a key card?" Granger asked. Garza didn't answer. He lifted the pistol toward us, hand steady. "I told them not to open the gate," he said, voice hoarse. "They didn't listen. They opened it, let it in, now we all burn." I started to lower my weapon. "We're not infected, we're just trying to get out." He smiled, a sad, broken thing. "You're already dead, you just haven't laid down yet." Then he raised the pistol. Granger didn't hesitate. He stepped forward and fired. The revolver cracked once. Garza stumbled back, blood exploding from his shoulder. He didn't scream, just stared at the hole in his body like it didn't belong there. Then he slumped to the ground. We rushed forward. I pulled the keycard from his vest, captain class. The door opened on the first swipe. Beyond it, the visitors' lobby was chaos. Shattered windows, overturned chairs. A security monitor still showed a live feed of the parking lot. Emergency lights spinning. Bodies lying still beside a state van, but there was a path. A service door marked emergency exit stood slightly ajar, leading out to the access lot. The open world. We were almost out, but then we heard it. A sound I will never forget. Not a groan, not a scream. A whisper multiplied. A dozen voices murmuring the same broken sentence, over and over, overlapping in perfect disharmony. "Let us out, let us out, let us out." It wasn't just a chant, it was a compulsion. The voices didn't belong to one group, or even one kind of person. I recognized accents, tones, fragments of speech from across the prison spectrum. Inmates, corrections officers, even a few civilian workers. But the rhythm was exact, perfect, like they were all reading the same invisible cue. Something about it set my teeth on edge. Granger looked pale in the emergency light, the revolver slack in his grip. We backed away from the shattered glass double doors of the visitors' lobby. On the other side, the figures were packed in tight. Some pressed their foreheads to the glass, others stood motionless, with heads cocked slightly to one side, staring in with eyes that didn't blink. The door creaked. A rusted hinge groaned, and then they moved. Suddenly, all at once, their hands reaching out in perfect synchronization. I slammed the bar lock on the service door behind us and motioned Granger to follow. We bolted through the narrow access hallway, past the intake lockers and through the final personnel screening gate. Here, the prison's security ended, and the outer world began. We hit the final exit door with our shoulders. It gave way to a concrete loading dock behind the main admin building. The air outside was cold and wet, thick with that coastal salt that clings to everything. Fog blanketed the parking lot, and the sounds of the prison dulled to a distant, droning hum. Granger pointed to the chain-link fence ringing the staff lot. "There, that's our way out." We vaulted the dock rail and sprinted toward the rear gate, avoiding the broken glass and debris scattered across the ground. Several staff vehicles sat abandoned, doors open, keys still in the ignition. One white Ford Explorer still had its engine idling, red and blue strobes casting faint pulses against the mist. I slid into the driver's seat, fingers fumbling with the gear shift. Granger took shotgun, checking the revolver and covering the rear. The Explorer's tank was nearly full. Someone had been planning to leave, but never made it past the fence. I floored the gas and aimed for the north access lane. The gate was half open, a yellow and black security arm dangling uselessly to one side. We burst through with a crunch of metal, tires screaming across the wet pavement. Behind us, I heard the sound of breaking glass and something else. The voices again, growing louder, nearer, like the fog itself was carrying them. "Let us out! Let us out!" The prison receded behind us, swallowed by mist and concrete. I didn't look back, not yet. We sped north along the coastal road, Highway 1, the GPS still active in the dash. Signs for San Quentin faded in the rear view as we passed the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge turnoff. The fog grew thicker, wrapping around the SUV like smoke. The highway was almost completely abandoned. A few vehicles sat at odd angles, collisions maybe, some with doors open, others with spiderweb cracks across the windshield. No police, no ambulances, just scattered chaos, as if the world had begun to unravel in a quiet, systematic collapse. Granger finally broke the silence. "You saw it too, didn't you? Their eyes." I nodded, gripping the wheel tighter. They weren't just sick, they were synced, like they were hearing something we couldn't. We didn't talk after that. 20 minutes later, we reached a roadside turnout overlooking Point Moliday. The fog was lighter here, filtered by the rising sun. I pulled the SUV to a stop and cut the engine. The silence felt like a vacuum. We needed to regroup, check supplies, figure out our next move. I opened the glove box and found a laminated regional map and a half-crushed pack of cigarettes. Granger took one, lit it with the disposable in his coat pocket. The first drag calmed his hands. "Where do we go now?" "Not back," I said. "Not to the city. Whatever this is, it's spreading." He looked out toward the water, the morning light casting a shimmering path over the bay. "There's a wildlife station out by Breeny's Park. I worked a fire watch out there once during parole. Remote, stocked with MREs and backup power. No one goes near it anymore." It was a plan, more than we had 5 minutes ago. We got moving. The Explorer handled the dirt back roads without issue. By mid-morning, we were deep in the East Bay Hills, switchbacks cutting through dense trees and winding trails. Every so often, we passed something that chilled me to the core. Abandoned campsites, overturned ATVs, a ranger vehicle with its tire slashed and the windshield broken inward. Something had moved through here, and it hadn't been alone. We reached the Bryony's watch station just before noon. It was a small concrete structure built into the side of a ridge, surrounded by chain link and tall grass. Solar panels lined the roof, and a reinforced steel door marked "Cal Fire Reserves Only" stood half open. We entered slowly, weapons ready. Inside, the station was quiet. A single room with cots, lockers, and a small kitchenette. A generator hummed somewhere out back. One wall held a whiteboard with handwritten notes. The last entry was dated 2 days ago. "West Line heard movement. No return call, don't trust them if they speak." Underneath, someone had drawn a crude symbol. 3 concentric circles with a jagged line slashing through the center. We closed the door and bolted it shut. That night, we took shifts sleeping. I lay on a cot near the far wall, staring at the ceiling. I didn't close my eyes for more than a few seconds at a time. My thoughts kept circling back to those voices, the way they moved, the phrase they repeated. It wasn't just panic or madness, it was direction, purpose. Granger said something during his watch I haven't forgotten. They weren't trying to escape the prison, you know, that wasn't their end goal. I sat up, rubbing my eyes. "What do you mean?" He pointed toward the fog beyond the ridgeline. "They were already out. What we saw was just a distraction. They're spreading, infecting new groups, sinking them, one by one, piece by piece." He opened a locker and pulled out a portable weather radio. It crackled to life, static at first, then a burst of voice. FEMA, then local PD, a fire captain from Napa, all of them saying the same thing. Containment failed. Do not engage with infected symptoms not limited to aggression. Some display mimicry, coordinated behavior, false cognitive speech. Granger looked at me. False cognitive speech, that's what we heard, not begging, not memory, programming. The next morning we heard a voice outside the station. It was a child, maybe 10 or 11, calling softly for help. We looked through the slit window, no one was there, but the voice kept moving, circling the building. Then a second voice joined it, then a third, all of them repeating the same phrase in different tones like a twisted choir. "Let us in, let us in. We didn't open the door." That was 3 days ago. The voices still come at night, different people, always saying the same things. I've started writing this account down on a scavenged laptop we found in a ranger's gear bin. The radio still works, and we're picking up more transmissions every day. The outbreak has crossed state lines, Nevada, Oregon, Idaho. The same reports, bodies walking, people disappearing, survivors turning without wounds. Some kind of neurological takeover. Parasite. Signal. No one knows for sure. We're heading inland next, toward the National Forest. Granger says there's a fire tower north of Lassen that's still operational. Maybe there we'll find others, maybe we won't. But I've accepted something I didn't want to before. This isn't just a virus. It's a signal, a message, not to us. To them. And they're still listening. So if you find this, if you hear those words whispered outside your home at night, don't let them in, no matter what they say. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.